I think I need a bell, there we go. A gong, perhaps, to welcome you all back. I hope you're well fed and watered. It's nice to hear so many people wanting to chat, isn't it? Project, says David Lawrence. We've got a packed afternoon ahead of us, including a panel debate, breakout sessions and a keynote address from a man who is mad about chocolate, slavery-free chocolate. But first, our next speaker is from a Sedex member that's made sustainability its business ethos and integral to the success of its business and community, positively contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. Stephen Birkbeck is regarded as the pioneer of Australian sandalwood. His integration of social, ethical and environmental thinking into business has won him a string of major awards. He was the first Australian to export cosmetics, should I say, to France, which I think is the more fragrant equivalent of the British saying of selling coals to Newcastle. He now works with Dutjahn Sandalwood Oils, a company run by Indigenous desert nomads. They have cultural responsibility to safeguard the Santalum spicatum, or the Dutjahn, or the Australian sandalwood, in their homelands deep in the Gibson Desert, which is northeast of Kalgoorlie. The Indigenous peoples see a far greater financial benefit from the current business model, and they control the royalties. Please welcome Stephen Birkbeck.
Thank you.
Clicker, I'm supposed to have done that. Hey, that's you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I don't know if I have to say much more, but in context, I just want to establish who and why I'm speaking. Indigenous people really need to speak for themselves in the 21st century. I happen to have been involved with the Jarrow Tribe. It's a small tribe in the centre of the Gibson Desert, and this tribe is part of a much larger nation called the Mardoo Nation. I've been involved for 40 years with this group, and I retired in 2005, and there are people here in the audience that I know from, for example, Aveda, Shannon, from the 2004, the date of the establishment of Sedex, actually, when we all started this journey around the turn of the century into responsible purchasing. I got asked to rejoin the Desert Tribe in 2014, and my role as a mentor and guide to a traditional desert community, in context, I'm not a principal in the company, I have no shares in this organisation, and as a result I think I can be quite critical in an objective context of the supply chain and what is right today. And what I'd like to share with you is their case study. And to start this, first I might put my stopwatch on. So I can burble, so excuse me, I'll try not to. I'd first like to start by a very solemn and strong undertaking to recognise Tismal Crow, a Cherokee, Leon Sacratero, a Navajo Apache from North America, who joined with Bob Randall, the songman, and finally on the far left, Jamu Stevens, or Dusty Stevens, who was my mentor from the 1970s, and I lived with him and his tribe for 10 years. And the visionary for today, Ken Farmer, his nephew, Darren, is there on the far right. Why have we got an atomic explosion? Because the British government, in its wisdom with the Australian government in the 1950s, decided to test long-range missiles over the Jarrow Tribe's country and domain. And to this day, where we harvest the sandalwood, you have to be very careful that you don't explode some of this ordnance that's still there. The atomic bomb and the series of bombs that were put through the central deserts of Australia suddenly took this civilization out of its continuous occupation of the desert, in which this tribe had not met the Caucasian society. And from 1950 to 1977, the last of the nomads were forcibly taken into a township called Wiluna. And myself and my wife were lucky enough to live with these people for 10 years. All of that, what we call first contact, these are Indigenous people that have never been in our society before, obviously for the term. All of the first contact elders are dead, and over the last 30 years or so, I've continued to help with their land rights, and you'll see today quite a special position in terms of the story of these people and how they have been able to achieve an enormous amount. But here today, the purpose, I think, talking to Mark earlier, of why I'm here, is to communicate and celebrate, as per the speeches this morning in the opening, of the success that they've been able to achieve, but more importantly, today, what can be achieved with impact investment from a responsible supply chain. Because it's really in your hands today to see this sort of case study really start to unfold now. I mean, we've got such a wonderful grassroots example here for Sedex. And interestingly, the history and the origin of Sedex will weave into my story. We have here Clinton Farmer, and I want to take a moment to explain who Clinton is. Clinton is the son of Ken Farmer. This story is not my story. This is the story of this desert tribe, and it's the vision of Ken, his father. In 1977, he set up a sandalwood harvesting operation and started to fight and champion for his land rights. And to this day, his son is the chairman of the Kookaburra Aboriginal community. He's a director of Dutjahn Sandalwood Oils, and he's the chairman of the Ken Farmer Dutjahn Foundation. And all he wants to do is continue to have the right to teach what he has learnt and succeeded with to a broader coalition of desert people. Interesting, I was talking to you earlier, Mark, and you mentioned 16 years ago Sedex was formed. I think it was 2004, if I'm correct. I started to champion in my own company, which I said I sold a long time ago, the use of sandalwood oil from this tribe in products. And I started to realise through that journey there was some inalienable rights that these people had that I sort of felt that I was exploiting. So after a couple of years' success in the 1990s, around the year 2000, I sat down with the people and I said, look, how can we work with you and establish responsibility in terms of my purchasing of this resource from your country? Because the term biopiracy was just starting to emerge into the marketplace. And I felt somewhat of a robber, I suppose, in that I was taking advantage of the custom, the stories, and the traditional medicine of the people. And I was privileged to deal with some wonderful industry champions. For those not aware, Aveda is a subsidiary of Estee Lauder, which I believe is one of the largest, if not the largest, brand holder in North America. So a very large multinational brand. And Givaudan, a member of Sedex, who for a moment here I just want to underline, in terms of collaboration, this community are in your awards this evening through the work of Givaudan in collaboration. These two organisations recognised the early pioneering work we had done, and we approached this through the United Nations and said, look, we don't really know how we can recognise traditional medicine other than to say that it has to be voluntary because all the lawyers haven't figured it out. So as a company, we set up an Indigenous certified program. We started to pay some royalties, and Estee Lauder and Givaudan jumped on board. And without these two companies and without recognising them, Dutjahn wouldn't be here today. Now that particular initiative in 2004 has been through some trials and tribulations, but is really gathering now momentum and strength. And interestingly, that was, I believe, the year of your foundation as a group. I might actually look at my notes. It might, just in case I've written something here that I should impart. And this particular slide, I think, where we start talking about your role as a group, I look at what you've achieved, and I for one, I'm quite unaware of your achievements until being here. What I see, rightly or wrongly, is a world leader in responsible purchasing and supply chains. If you're not the world leader, you're arguably going to be, or you're very close to being that. And that's, from what I can see, a culmination of working with industry. I've asked a couple of your management staff here today to do, and what I'd employ all of the members associated with my industry to realise is the impact of your purchasing, the impact of your investment into supply chains. And this particular study, as you dig into Dutjahn, it's such a fantastic story for the Aboriginal people to own, control, And it's their vision, it's not my vision. I'm passing on to you. This is what they want, as opposed to Tarzan coming in out of the jungle imparting his marvellous vision. But one area that I'm struggling with to this day, and I hope it's a message that will come through loud and clear to my government in Australia, is that we need, I'm not doing this in any particular order, by the way, with the slides. I've got some pictures there you can watch as I talk. We need, I believe, Sedex needs to realise that you're actually, you've achieved so much, and I see the parallel in what these people are doing in Australia. But you're moving so fast, somewhere along the line, the government policies aren't keeping up, certainly in our country. And what we're finding is an unawareness, a lack of interest. It's all too hard for government sometimes to make changes. It's all about votes, and it's all about awareness. And certainly that's why I agreed to come here today, to try to create broader awareness of our struggle. We've achieved an enormous amount, but there's so much more that we can achieve. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe that the next transformational opportunity for your membership in the coalition you've created here is to sit down with government and get them to actually realise you are the future. These trends are reality, and they've got to get on board. And the votes will be there one day. Maybe not quite today, but that's where we need vision from government. And if I just come back to our story, we've achieved quite a bit. So we've had a native title right to resource. Let me explain exactly what that is and what that means. 30 years of fighting for land rights with the Jarrow people. Now, this is an area that the Caucasian society had no involvement economically, socially, at all. It's one of the most remote places, the Gibson Desert on the planet. But to get the land rights took 30 years. And in an unparalleled decision, Australia's land rights started with a Mabo decision. It's a landmark decision made many years ago, which firstly gave us land rights, recognition that the first people, the First Nation of Australia, needed recognition for their land. What we achieved with the Jarrow Tribe, which is quite unique in the world, certainly in Australia, is the federal court ruled that the people not only had the rights to land, but they had full resource rights, meaning the sandalwood was something they could economically own and control. We, to this day, have not, and as I said, excuse me if I'm talking in parallel, I'm sure you can read what I've put on screen, and it might help some of the context, but what we need to do as an industry, and I'm talking now about the perfume and the cosmetic industry, we need to force change even faster. What we've achieved so far, we've got to do more. And we can't do it without local government and national governments getting on board and supporting and complementing what we're doing. So, for example, in our particular case, we've got this massive area. So in context, look at those coloured areas on that. That's half of Australia. For those that know my country and my state, Western Australia is roughly half of the nation. That area in context is around 250,000 square kilometres of land rights that have been ruled as exclusive determination. It's the highest form of land rights Australian courts can award. Yet to this day, we are still buying our sandalwood, the Aboriginal people, and paying the government for the wood. And whilst we've been able to make a business model from that, the policy framework within Western Australia that I'm trying to champion with the government, I'm using today in this conference, I hope, to go away from here inspired by meeting and networking everyone, and going back to the Treasurer of Western Australia, the Honourable Ben Wyatt, who's also Minister of Lands and Minister of Indigenous Affairs, and just happens to be an Aboriginal man, the most senior politician in it's the most senior Aboriginal person in Australia's history. Now, Ben is a great visionary. He's a wonderful treasurer, but he's dealing in an economy that is a little bit akin to California, our state, in that we've got a very big resource, big income export state, and he's got a very busy job. But the most important thing he can do for his own integrity in the course of the next term of office, in the current term, is get on board with responsible supply chains and understand how important what you're trying to achieve is. And we have never had a better opportunity than this particular person to achieve that. The Minister of Forests and Ben Wyatt, the Treasurer, are both sympathetic to what we're doing and both want to see change. But it gets back to that deep bureaucracy that we all understand a little bit from Trump and his commentary to how it's hard to change government. What we're seeing in Western Australia is an entrenched desire to retain empires within government departments in spite of ministers wanting to intervene. And the only way we can forcibly create greater consequential change and the dynamics and the speed of that change is through groups like yourselves helping us, getting attention to the story. And that's what really impressed me this morning with your MC, with Maxine, talking about her own impressions. So I want to give you this number here now. This is a $500 million resource. Now let me qualify this slide. I don't really know that it is a $500 million resource. And what I mean by that is it's such a vast area, largely unexplored to the white man, that this tribe know this area so well. But just that area alone is 67,000 square kilometres. And I don't know if anyone in the audience can look up on their mobile phone for me how big England is. Can someone do that and tell us? It's probably and if you go back to that original map, you've got an area of 250,000 square kilometres. Can you imagine this marvellous desert with this arid tree? And what we've done is we've actually gone in there with GPS equipment into some incredibly inhospitable terrain, and we've been able to, how am I going for time, by the way? I've got 5 minutes. We've been able to ascertain the density of the sandalwood trees through this large area. And then through aerial surveillance, I then got somebody, before this speech, particularly for today, to tell me, well, we need to do this anyway. Roughly, what is the value of that asset? So in that community alone, we've got a $500 million Australian dollar asset. You then combine that with the other communities that are following on our precedent, because we've got 6 other communities, all with their own land, and you've got this asset. I'm just going to put it out there. It's $1 billion asset. Now, I could be wrong. It could be $500 million. It could be $2 billion. It's a big asset. And currently, we're dealing with a community in context. They're the most impoverished regional community within our Australian society. And let me give you some numbers to put just how important your support is. The average death rate of an Australian male of my age is probably around 80. I don't know what it is. It's something like that. For an Aboriginal Indigenous Australian, it's 67. For a Mardu Muntal-Jarrow male, it's 38. The average death rate of this community is 38. It's disgusting. And you can help. I mean, what do we do? People ask me, why do I do this? I don't know. I really don't. I'm not going to change the genocide that's occurring. It's a consequence to the Romans did it to you. I mean, it's a consequence to civilization, in inverted commas. But what you've got here is something really special. The last of the nomads in Australia. 1977, Ben and Amy came out of the desert. I was privileged to have this couple work with me. And it's a humanity's gift that we, at our own peril, we ignore. It is our last contact with our own tribal roots. And so what we need and what I want and why I'm here and why the people have brought me here indirectly, we want your support, desperately want your support. We've achieved so much. I better show you some of the things we've achieved. The employment is obviously the normal one that people look to. But forget employment, excuse me. I don't want to sound politically incorrect here. But Indigenous equity is what's more important. Own the supply chain. Now that's what we've done that's different. What have we done why am I here standing up here? Because the Indigenous people, it's their company. You know, we're not paying the Indigenous people a royalty. That's how I started the journey. No, they had a better idea. No, Steve, we don't want a royalty. We want to own it. So they've built and created a state-of-the-art essential oils factory within an outback town of Kalgoorlie. Have a look on the map where that is. And these people have done this themselves. And we talk of the impact. I mean, the stereotypes, for those of you that haven't lived in an underprivileged, prejudiced world, it's pretty hard to understand how to break these stereotypes. But look up there, look at that stage. The group photo is their partners. They established a partnership. They brought in $2 million of equity investment, but they have 50% seats on the board. They contain and retain 50% of the profits of that company. And Darren Farmer, who is the visionary behind this whole thing with his cousin, together with his cousin, have created something absolutely wonderful. We've achieved that through some great companies. And interesting, let me just give you, firstly, and most importantly, Givaudan. Givaudan is a member here. It's the largest fragrance compounder in the world. And I was privileged to award them the Environmental Award in New York in 2013, I believe, the Roosevelt Award with the President Gilles Andrier. Wonderful company. Wouldn't be here without them. Interestingly, Aveda, I've mentioned Aveda, great culture, great company. Why we happen to be here today is ASOP is an emerging Australian brand globally owned by Natura, a member of your organisation, and a condition of our supply to ASOP is we join Sedex. So that's why I'm up here. There's so much more I could say and will, and be really keen to meet with everyone that has an interest in this story. And just remember how important your personal involvement in all supply chains is. So thank you.